most common phrase that people will hear in field production 1 is, "I hate that font." To me, font is text that's going to add information that you, in a way that's more efficient than could be gotten another way. It's a multi-purpose tool. You can like double the meaningful impact of an image with a couple of words.
Sarcasm is the reason for fonts. You need some sort of special way to emphasize certain words, and by changing the font of the word, I think you can really convey the expression that you were intended.
Or there's a depiction of something, then there's a word. Those two together can be more than the sum of the parts. They can create a thought or idea in the viewer's mind.
Depending on the word that you're trying to create is why we have so many different types of fonts, because we have so many different types of words. The point of the matter is, fonts can have an effect on people beyond what they actually visually see.
The benefit to the recipient of a well-crafted font is they don't have to struggle to understand what the filmmaker is trying to show them or tell them. Can I read it? Is it legible? That's pretty much the two ideals.
Legibility. You got to be able to read it. If you can't read it, it's not a good font.
It's immediately obvious to the momentary glance. The most common phrase that people will hear in field production 1 is, "I hate that font." And that's because people will ignore the variables that they have to work with. They will choose the most garish, cheap, trashy font template that there is. You have thousands of choices to make. You don't have to make all those, you can make just a few.
A lot of times people will just put the font on there, find the color that they wanted, maybe add a drop shadow, and then ta-da, they're done. And that's the thing too, there's hundreds of options to add to the font. So just the shape of the letter isn't just everything. But one effect isn't enough. The stroke, the line outside the letter, the spacing between each letter, the kerning there, how much distance between the row above it and the row below it, these things all need to be factored in.
A bad font is one that is partly discernible and partly not discernible. White on white, bad. Dark on dark, bad. Some sort of recessive or receding color as an outline, as a border, that's bad. And receding colors are the cool colors, the ones in the blue part of the spectrum. And advancing colors are the ones in the warm part of the spectrum. If it's some crazy oddball font that you put there because you've never seen it before and you think, okay, this is really going to make a great impression. This is very creative. This is not the usual run-of-the-mill. This is special. I chose a special font, and the viewer has to look at it and go, what the hell is this? Is this written in Elvish or something? That takes 2 seconds for the viewers to just kind of shut off their mind. And they start thinking about something that they want to think about.
Confusion is the worst effect from a bad font. If for every project, stick to one font. You want to run with a theme. People want to try to make every word unique, but sometimes that's not the overall idea. Don't try to just mash it up to make it look different, because honestly, it just becomes more confusing. So find a font for your project and stick with it.
But inevitably, people will scroll down through these hideous templates that are already there. I avoid the templates naturally. I just scroll down until I see one that I know it's going to be simple and clean and stand out. It should be white or yellow. If you want to get more creative than that, then you have to be very careful. Build it right on top of the image that you're going to have it on. Build it right there so that you can undo any mistakes as they occur. Say you make a wise choice and you have a white font, and that shows up very well against the dark part of the background that's in your image, and it disappears completely when you get to the bright white window that's there. There's a few other things you can do to get it to stand out from the background. One is a drop shadow. It's going to separate your text, which you want to be the foreground. It's going to separate it from the background. And you have an infinite variety of drop shadows and transparency for the shadows. What color it is, whether it's in sharp focus, whether it's in soft focus. A white drop shadow that will separate and lift, almost 3D style, your text up from the background image. Sometimes it's interesting if you use complementary colors, but don't overdo it, because they separate from each other very well. You put yellow and blue together, the yellow makes the blue bluer, and the blue makes the yellow yellower.
Ideally, characteristics of a good font, it depends on what you're trying to convey. So again, if it's just a name of a logo, for example, if it's a tasty food, you're going to want something that's kind of elegant looking, you know, maybe a little curly, a little swooshy. If it's, for example, a box of ammunition, it needs to be a little bit more blocky, a little more, you know, aggressive looking. When in reality, if you apply the drop shadow and then add a little bit of a stroke and then add a little bit of this effect, maybe put a gradient across the letters, you really can kind of make a more dynamic looking effect. It will come out looking a lot more professional that way too.
Fonts on television and in video text are more common than anybody ever thought that they would be. The crazy business channels like CNBC, they'll have like 17 different fonts going at the same time. There'll be bullet lists down one side, there'll be a crawl across the bottom, there'll be another crawl across the top, and people will sit there and they'll jump around like crazy, you know, finding the information that they want.
Word processors are the most common places where fonts are found. Of course, you know, in advertising and marketing, everyone tries to make their own unique font so that their brand stands out. These become icons unto themselves, so the font itself can become kind of very recognizable. Times New Roman is a great standard font as far as just being a standard font. It's very legible in any type size, all the way down to 4 or 5 points big, all the way up to huge and massive. It's very easy to read. Depending on what it is, the message that you're trying to convey, again, will depend on the type of font you want to use.
I usually start with white. I always put a border on it.
I prefer either black text on a white background or white text on a black background. I find if it's print, the black text on a white background looks better. If it's a visual screen, something that's lit up where there's light actually being emitted, I find that white text on a black background works better.